Raindrops hammered against the observation windows of Sanctuary Station like tiny bullets, each one carrying the metallic dust of the asteroid field beyond. Dr. Emma Hayes had grown used to the constant noise after 6 months alone on the research outpost. But tonight something felt different. The sound coming from her storage room wasn't rain at all. Emma pressed her ear against the storage room door and held her breath. Something was definitely moving inside, and it wasn't the usual settling sounds of supply crates. The scratching noise came again, followed by what sounded like a low whimper. Her research station on the edge of the void sector wasn't supposed to have any visitors. Sanctuary Station was built specifically to be isolated, a perfect place to study alien wildlife without interference from either human colonies or alien territories. The nearest civilization was 3 days away by the fastest ship. Emma grabbed the emergency scanner from her belt and ran it along the doorframe. 2 life forms showed up on the display, both smaller than adult humans, but with body temperatures running much hotter. The energy signatures looked familiar, but she hoped she was wrong. She was not wrong. When Emma finally worked up the courage to open the door, 2 pairs of golden eyes stared back at her from the darkest corner of the room. The creatures were huddled together behind a stack of water purification tablets, and even in the dim light, she could see the distinctive obsidian claws and silver-streaked dark fur that marked them as Ravenclaw juveniles. Emma's training kicked in immediately. Ravenclaw were the apex predators of known space. Adult Ravenclaw could tear through battle armor with their bare hands and had reflexes fast enough to dodge plasma fire. Even cubs like these 2 could probably kill her without much effort. But these cubs weren't attacking. They were shaking. The larger of the 2, with more silver markings around its muzzle, tried to stand up but collapsed immediately. Emma could see dark blood matting the fur on its left side. The smaller one pressed, closer to its companion, and made a sound that was almost like crying. Every rule Emma had learned about xenobiology told her to back away, seal the door, and call for emergency evacuation. Ravenclaw didn't show weakness. They didn't seek help. They certainly didn't hide in supply closets whimpering like lost pets. Instead, Emma found herself stepping into the room with her hands raised, making the soft clicking sound she used to calm frightened lab animals. "Hey there," she whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cubs watched her with those impossibly bright golden eyes. The injured one's breathing was shallow and rapid. Emma had studied enough alien physiology to recognize the signs of severe blood loss. She took another careful step forward. The smaller cub made a hissing sound and showed its fangs, but didn't move to attack. It was protecting its wounded companion, Emma realized. That level of loyalty was actually unusual for Ravenclaw, who were known to abandon the weak. "I have medical supplies," Emma said, still keeping her voice low and calm. "I can help." She slowly reached into her field kit and pulled out a basic scanner. The wounded cub's vitals appeared on her display, and Emma's stomach dropped. Internal bleeding, infection starting to set in, and what looked like 3 broken ribs. Without treatment, this cub would be dead within hours. The protective cub finally moved, stepping partially in front of its companion. It was clearly exhausted but still ready to fight if necessary. Emma had never seen such determination in a juvenile of any species. "Okay, I get it," she said. "You don't trust me. But your friend is dying, and I'm the only help available. What do you want to do?" As if it understood her words, the injured cub made a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a sigh. It looked at its companion and made a series of soft chirping noises. The protective cub looked back and forth between Emma and its friend several times before finally stepping aside. Emma moved carefully toward the wounded cub, keeping her scanner visible. "I'm going to give you something for the pain first, okay? Then we'll work on those injuries." The cub didn't resist when Emma gently injected a broad-spectrum painkiller into its shoulder. Within minutes, its breathing became easier, and some of the tension left its body. Working on a Ravenclaw, even a young one, was terrifying. Emma had to keep reminding herself that these were still children by their species' standards, probably equivalent to human 12-year-olds. But their claws were already razor-sharp, and their teeth could easily tear through her protective gloves. The protective cub watched every move Emma made. At one point, when Emma had to probe a particularly deep wound, the injured cub let out a pained yelp. Its companion immediately moved closer, pressing its forehead against the wounded one's shoulder and making soft purring sounds. "You two are really close, aren't you?" Emma said, continuing to work. "That's not what the textbooks say about your species." It took nearly 3 hours to stabilize the injured cub. Emma had to repair internal damage, seal multiple lacerations, and set those broken ribs using a combination of human medical techniques and what she knew about Ravenclaw physiology. The whole time she kept expecting the cubs to turn on her, but they remained cooperative and even seemed grateful. When she finally finished, both cubs were exhausted. The injured one was sleeping deeply under the influence of painkillers, while its companion struggled to stay awake and keep watch. "You need rest too," Emma told the protective cub. "And food. When did you two last eat?" The cub just stared at her with those golden eyes. Emma realized it probably didn't understand human speech beyond basic emotional tones. She left the storage room and returned with blankets, water, and some protein bars that were supposed to be compatible with most alien digestive systems. The protective cub sniffed the food suspiciously but didn't eat until Emma took a bite first to show it was safe. "I'm Emma, by the way," she said as the cub finally started eating. "I study animals and aliens for a living. Not that you care about that." The cub paused in its eating and looked at her. For just a moment, Emma thought she saw something almost like gratitude in those alien features. "Look, I don't know how you two ended up here or what happened to you," Emma continued. "But you're safe now. I'll help you heal, and then you can decide what you want to do next." She left more supplies within reach and headed for the door. At the threshold, she turned back to see the protective cub carefully covering its sleeping companion with one of the blankets, using its claws with surprising gentleness. That night, Emma lay awake wondering what she had gotten herself into. Harboring Ravenclaw cubs was probably illegal under at least 12 different galactic treaties. If their pack came looking for them, Sanctuary Station would be destroyed without question. But something about those two cubs was different. The way they cared for each other, the way they had trusted her despite every instinct telling them not to, the gratitude in that simple look. These weren't the mindless predators described in the official reports. Emma had dedicated her life to understanding alien species, but she had a feeling these two cubs were about to teach her things no textbook could ever contain. The smell of ozone filled the air as another electrical storm raged across the outer rim of the system. 3 weeks had passed since Emma discovered the cubs in her storage room, and her quiet research station had transformed into something she never could have imagined. The injured cub, whom she had started calling Ash because of his darker fur, was healing remarkably well. His companion, Storm, with her distinctive silver markings, had gradually become less defensive and more curious about everything around her. Emma watched Storm investigate the station's main lab, her golden eyes tracking the movement of every instrument and display. Ravenclaw were supposed to be pure predators, focused only on hunting and survival, but Storm showed the same scientific curiosity that Emma had always felt when encountering something new. "Careful with that sample analyzer," Emma said as Storm sniffed at the expensive equipment. "It's the only one I have out here." Storm looked back at her and made a series of soft clicking sounds. Over the past weeks, Emma had begun to recognize some of the cub's vocalizations. This particular sound seemed to mean acknowledgement or understanding. The real breakthrough had come 5 days earlier. Emma had been working late, analyzing mineral samples from the nearby asteroid field, when she felt something warm press against her leg. Storm had quietly approached and was now leaning against Emma's chair, making the soft purring sound that Emma had learned meant contentment. That night, for the first time, both cubs had slept outside the storage room. They made a nest of blankets near Emma's quarters, with Storm positioned where she could watch both the corridor and Emma's door. Ash, still recovering, slept curled up in the center of their makeshift den. Emma had read every available study on Ravenclaw behavior, and none of it matched what she was observing. These cubs weren't just surviving in her presence, they were thriving. They had gained weight, their fur had become glossy and bright, and they moved with increasing confidence around the station. More importantly, they were learning. Emma had started simple, showing them how human tools worked, and explaining basic concepts through gestures and demonstrations. The cubs picked up everything incredibly quickly. Storm learned to operate the food dispensers within 2 days. Ash figured out how to adjust the station's temperature controls to create warm sleeping spots. But it was their emotional intelligence that truly amazed Emma. When she had gotten frustrated trying to repair a broken communications array, Storm had brought her a cup of the herbal tea she liked, somehow understanding that the ritual of drinking it helped Emma think more clearly. When Emma had cut her hand on a sharp piece of metal, Ash had immediately fetched the medical kit and watched carefully as she treated the wound, as if memorizing the process. The cubs were teaching Emma as much as she was teaching them. Their senses were incredibly sharp, and they had started alerting her to problems before her instruments detected them. Storm could smell chemical leaks that Emma's sensors missed. Ash could hear mechanical failures in the station's systems hours before. They became critical. One morning, Emma woke to find both cubs sitting by her door making urgent chittering sounds. Storm kept running to the viewport and back, clearly trying to communicate something important. Emma followed them to the observation deck and immediately saw what had alarmed them. A massive solar storm was building in the system's star, the kind that could overload the station's systems and potentially kill everyone aboard. "How did you know that was coming?" Emma asked as she rushed to initiate emergency protocols. The cubs couldn't possibly understand solar radiation patterns or electromagnetic fields, but somehow they had sensed the danger hours before Emma's equipment registered it. The solar storm lasted 18 hours. Emma had to shut down most of the station's systems to prevent catastrophic damage, leaving them in near darkness with minimal heating. She had worried that the cubs might panic in the confined, unfamiliar environment, but instead they had taken care of her. Storm used her body heat to keep Emma warm during the worst of the cold, while Ash brought her food and water at regular intervals. When Emma fell asleep from exhaustion, she woke to find both cubs curled around her, creating a living blanket that kept her safe through the night. It was during that long, dark period that Emma finally understood what made these cubs different. They weren't outcasts because they were weak or defective. They were outcasts because they possessed something their species considered dangerous: compassion. The revelation came when Emma asked them directly, using the simple gestural language they had developed together. "Why were you alone? Where is your pack?" Storm and Ash exchanged a long look, communicating in their rapid, clicking language. Then Storm approached Emma's tablet and, with surprising dexterity, began drawing with her claw on the touchscreen. The first image showed multiple Ravenclaw cubs in what looked like a fighting arena. Storm drew herself and Ash among them, facing off against a third cub that was clearly injured and cowering. The second image showed the injured cub reaching out, apparently asking for help or mercy. Storm drew herself and Ash stepping forward, but instead of attacking, they positioned themselves protectively around the wounded cub. The final image showed adult Ravenclaw, their postures radiating anger and disapproval. Storm drew herself and, Ash being driven away from the group into empty darkness, Emma stared at the crude but clear drawings. "You were exiled because you protected someone weak? Because you showed mercy?" Both cubs made the clicking sound that meant yes. Emma felt a mixture of anger and sadness. These remarkable young beings had been cast out by their own people for displaying exactly the qualities that made them so special. In trying to save another's life, they had been condemned to die alone. "Their loss," Emma said firmly. "Any society that punishes compassion doesn't deserve members like you." From that day forward, something shifted in their relationship. The cubs stopped being Emma's guests or patients and became something closer to family. They developed routines together, shared meals, and even played simple games that Emma invented. Storm turned out to have a mischievous streak, often hiding Emma's tools and leading her on elaborate hunts around the station to find them. Ash was quieter but more observant, and he began anticipating Emma's needs with uncanny accuracy, bringing her exactly the right equipment before she even knew she needed it. Emma taught them more complex human concepts: cooperation, planning, the idea that protecting others made a group stronger rather than weaker. The cubs absorbed these lessons eagerly and began demonstrating them in their behavior. When Emma got sick with a mild virus, both cubs immediately went into caretaker mode. They brought her food, maintained the station systems they had learned to operate, and took turns keeping watch while she slept. Storm even attempted to make the herbal tea Emma liked, though her version was barely drinkable. Most remarkably, they began hunting together as a team specifically to provide for Emma. Their natural predatory instincts remained intact, but they had learned to channel them in service of protecting and caring for someone else. Emma found herself looking forward to their presence in ways that surprised her. After years of solitary research, she had grown accustomed to silence and isolation. But the cubs filled the station with warmth and life. Their soft purring in the evenings became a comfort she couldn't imagine living without. She was beginning to understand that what they had built together was something entirely new, a bridge between species that perhaps had never existed before. The cubs were still Ravenclaw, still possessed of all their natural strength and hunting instincts, but they had learned to express those traits through protection rather than domination. Emma had given them safety and healing, but they had given her something even more valuable. They had shown her that the universe contained possibilities for connection and understanding that went far beyond anything in her scientific training. As she watched Storm carefully tend to a small plant they had found growing in the station's hydroponic bay, Emma realized that these cubs weren't just survivors of their species' harsh culture. They were pioneers of something entirely new, ambassadors of a gentler way of being that could change everything both their peoples believed about strength, survival, and what it meant to be truly powerful. A cup of synthetic coffee sat forgotten and growing cold on Emma's desk when the proximity alarm shattered the peaceful morning routine at Sanctuary Station. 3 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, and they were moving fast toward her small research outpost. Storm and Ash were beside her instantly, their golden eyes wide with an emotion Emma had never seen in them before: pure terror. Storm began making rapid, distressed chittering sounds while Ash pressed himself against Emma's legs as if trying to hide behind her. The scanner display showed the ship configurations, and Emma's blood went cold. Ravenclaw hunting vessels, their hulls covered in the ritual scars that marked successful kills. These weren't explorers or traders. These were warriors coming to reclaim what they considered their property. "It's going to be okay," Emma whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "We'll figure this out." Storm grabbed Emma's arm with surprising gentleness for someone with obsidian claws and pulled her toward the communication console. Using the gestural language they had developed, Storm frantically tried to explain something. Emma watched the rapid claw movements and gradually understood. "Your father's coming, the pack leader?" Both cubs made the sound that meant yes, and Ash actually whimpered. Emma had never heard him make such a vulnerable noise before. The communication system crackled to life with a voice that sounded like gravel grinding against steel. When the translator kicked in, the words carried an authority that made Emma's spine straighten involuntarily. "Human facility. You harbor stolen cubs. Return our young or face the consequences of pack law." Emma looked down at Storm and Ash, both of whom were now pressed against her legs on either side. These weren't stolen cubs. They were refugees who had found sanctuary after their own people had abandoned them to die. But she knew that distinction would mean nothing to whoever commanded those ships. "This is Dr. Emma Hayes of Sanctuary Station," she replied, keeping her voice as steady as possible. "The cubs came here injured and seeking shelter. They've been given medical treatment and care. Cubs do not seek shelter. Cubs hunt or die. You have corrupted them with weakness. They will return to face judgment." The transmission cut off, and Emma watched the 3 ships continue their approach. She had perhaps 20 minutes before they reached the station. Storm tugged at Emma's sleeve and led her to the viewport. With quick, urgent gestures, the cub explained what was coming. Emma understood enough to realize that the approaching ships carried not just Storm and Ash's immediate pack, but also representatives from other Ravenclaw families. This wasn't just a retrieval mission. This was some kind of formal tribunal. "They want to make an example of you two," Emma said quietly. "Don't they?" Ash made a low, mournful sound that confirmed her worst fears. Emma had faced dangerous situations before in her research career, But nothing quite like this. She was about to confront beings who could literally tear her apart with their bare hands, and they were coming to reclaim cubs who had become as precious to her as her own family. But as she looked at Storm and Ash, seeing the trust in their golden eyes despite their obvious terror, Emma felt something she hadn't expected. Fierce, protective anger. These cubs had suffered enough. They had been cast out for showing mercy, had nearly died alone and forgotten, and had finally found peace and happiness. She would not let anyone take that away from them. The docking bay doors opened with a sound like thunder, and Emma heard the heavy footsteps of multiple Ravenclaw entering her station. Storm and Ash positioned themselves on either side of her, and Emma realized with a mixture of pride and horror that they were protecting her even though they were clearly terrified of what was coming. The leader who entered the main corridor was massive even by Ravenclaw standards. His fur was black with silver streaks that marked him as an elder, and his claws had been ritually sharpened until they gleamed like polished knives. Behind him came 4 other adults, all bearing the scars and ornaments of successful hunters. The leader's golden eyes fixed immediately on Storm and Ash, and his expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Emma to interpret. But the cub's reaction was unmistakable. They pressed even closer to Emma, and Ash actually moved slightly in front of her. "I am Alpha Prime Talon," the massive Ravenclaw said, his translated words carrying the weight of absolute authority. "These cubs belong to my pack. They will return." Emma stepped forward, feeling Storm and Ash move with her to maintain their protective positions. "They're not property to be claimed. They're living beings who made a choice to stay here." Talon's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Cubs do not make choices. Cubs obey or die. These two have been contaminated by your weakness. They have forgotten what it means to be Ravenclaw." "Have they?" Emma asked, gesturing to Storm and Ash. "Look at them. They're stronger than when they arrived, healthier, more confident. They've learned skills your people never taught them. How is that contamination?" One of the other adults, a female with intricate patterns scarred into her fur, stepped forward. "They cower behind a human instead of facing their alpha. They have lost all honor." "They're protecting someone they care about," Emma shot back. "That takes more courage than mindless aggression." Talon made a sound that might have been laughter, but held no humor. "Soft human concepts. Care and protection are weaknesses that get warriors killed. These cubs were exiled for refusing to eliminate weakness in others. Instead of learning strength from their punishment, they have embraced even greater weakness." Storm suddenly moved forward, positioning herself directly between Emma and Talon. The massive alpha looked down at his daughter with an expression of disbelief and growing rage. "You dare stand against your own blood?" Talon demanded. Storm raised her head and made a series of sharp, defiant sounds. Emma couldn't understand the Ravenclaw language, but the tone was unmistakable. Storm was not backing down. Ash joined his companion, also facing his alpha with determination that Emma found both admirable and terrifying. These cubs were willing to face certain death rather than abandon her. "They've made their choice," Emma said quietly. "The question is whether you'll respect that choice or prove that your entire culture is built on nothing but fear and control." The words were out before Emma could stop them, and she immediately regretted the provocation. Talon's eyes flashed with fury, and his claws extended to their full, deadly length. "You dare insult Pack Law, human? You who have stolen our young and corrupted them with your poisonous weakness?" "I didn't steal anyone," Emma replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "They came to me injured and dying, cast out by their own people for the crime of showing mercy. I gave them what your pack couldn't: acceptance, care, and the chance to grow into something better than just killing machines." The scarred female hissed at Emma's words, but Talon held up a hand for silence. His golden eyes studied the cubs, who remained positioned protectively around Emma, despite the obvious danger they were in. "You believe you have made them better?" Talon asked, his voice deadly quiet. "I know I have." "Then prove it. Face me in single combat. If you survive, the cubs may choose their own path. If you fall, they return to face proper justice for their corruption." Emma felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She was a scientist, not a warrior. Talon was probably 3 times her weight and possessed reflexes that could dodge energy weapons. The challenge was essentially a death sentence. But before she could respond, Storm and Ash both moved to stand directly in front of her, their own claws extended and their postures radiating fierce determination. Storm looked back at Emma and made the clicking sound that meant no, with more emphasis than Emma had ever heard. Ash turned to face his alpha and spoke in the Ravenclaw language, his young voice carrying surprising authority. Whatever he said made Talon take a step backward, in shock. "What did he say?" Emma asked. The scarred female answered, her voice filled with disbelief. "He said they would fight their own sire before allowing harm to come to their chosen pack leader." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Emma could see the other adults exchanging glances of confusion and something that might have been fear. This was clearly unprecedented in Ravenclaw society. Talon stared at his cubs for a long moment, and Emma thought she saw something like pain flicker across his alien features. "You would bear fangs against your own blood for this human?" Storm responded with a series of firm, clear sounds. She moved to press against Emma's side while maintaining eye contact with her father, showing that her loyalty was absolute. "They're not choosing me over you," Emma said, finally understanding. "They're choosing a different way of being Ravenclaw, one that includes loyalty, protection, and care, alongside strength and hunting skill." "There is no other way," Talon roared. "There is only survival of the strongest. These concepts you have taught them will get them killed." "Will they?" Emma asked. "Or will these concepts make them stronger than your kind has ever imagined? Look at them, Talon. Really look. Do they seem weak to you? Do they seem afraid of anything except losing what they've found here?" For the first time since entering the station, Talon actually examined his cubs carefully. Emma could see him taking in their improved physical condition, their confident postures, the way they moved together with perfect coordination. These were not broken or weakened beings. They were Ravenclaw who had learned to be something more than their genetics had originally programmed. But tradition and pride warred with observation in Talon's golden eyes. The weight of centuries of Ravenclaw culture pressed against the evidence of his own senses, and Emma could see that neither was willing to give ground easily. The standoff stretched on, predator and protectors facing each other across a divide that seemed unbridgeable, while the future of 2 remarkable young lives hung in the balance. Emma realized that whatever happened next would not just determine the fate of Storm and Ash, but might reshape the understanding between their species forever. The silence was broken by a low growl from one of the other adults, clearly impatient with the delay. Talon's head snapped toward the sound, and Emma saw something shift in his expression. The moment of doubt was passing, replaced by the iron certainty of generations of tradition. "Enough," Talon said finally. "These cubs have been poisoned against their own nature. They will return and be cleansed of this corruption, or they will die as they should have died in exile." Storm and Ash pressed closer to Emma, their resolve unwavering despite the terrible choice they faced. Emma looked down at them and realized that whatever came next, she would face it with them. They had chosen her as their family, and she would not abandon them now, no matter what the cost. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap when distant alarms began wailing from the station's outer sensors. Emma's attention split between the deadly confrontation in front of her and the urgent warnings flashing on her control panels. Something was approaching fast from the deep void beyond the asteroid field. "What is that sound?" Talon demanded, his golden eyes never leaving his defiant cubs. Emma glanced at her displays and felt her blood turn to ice. "Void wraiths," she whispered. "A whole swarm of them." The scarred female warrior hissed in what might have been fear. Even Ravenclaw knew to avoid the parasitic creatures that fed on energy and metal, turning starships into hollow shells drifting through space. "How many?" Talon asked, his tone shifting from anger to tactical assessment. "Sensors show at least 30 individual signatures," Emma replied, her hands flying over the controls. "They'll be here in less than 10 minutes." Storm and Ash immediately moved into action, their body language changing from defensive to focused. Hunting mode. They began making rapid clicking sounds to each other, and Emma realized they were coordinating some kind of plan. "Your cubs understand the threat," Talon observed, watching his offspring with new attention. "They understand more than you know," Emma said, initiating the station's emergency protocols. "Storm, Ash, help me seal the outer compartments. We need to reduce our energy signature." The cubs moved with practiced efficiency, having learned the station's systems over the past weeks. Storm operated the environmental controls while Ash helped Emma secure the critical research data. Their coordination was flawless, each anticipating the other's actions. Talon and his warriors watched in growing amazement as the cubs worked alongside Emma. This wasn't the mindless obedience they expected from young Ravenclaw, but intelligent cooperation between equals. "The wraiths are attracted to energy signatures," Emma explained as she worked. "Traditional Ravenclaw tactics won't work against them. They don't have physical bodies you can claw or tear. They're pure energy that feeds on technology and life force." "Then how do you fight them?" the scarred female asked. Emma looked at Storm and Ash, who were now positioned by the main power controls. "You don't fight them. You outsmart them." The first void wraiths reached the station's outer hall with a sound like screaming metal. Through the viewports, Emma could see their writhing forms, like living shadows shot through with crackling electricity. They began probing the station's defenses, looking for ways to drain its power. "They're trying to breach the energy grid," Emma said. "Storm, initiate the decoy protocol we practiced." Storm's claws danced over the control panel, activating a series of false energy signatures throughout the station. The wraiths immediately swarmed toward the decoys, giving Emma time to implement the next phase of their plan. "Ash, reroute power to the emergency beacon. Make it look like we're calling for help." Ash quickly complied, his understanding of human technology now rivaling that of trained engineers. The beacon began broadcasting a distress signal, but not the kind Talon expected. "You're not calling for rescue," Talon realized watching the tactical display. "You're calling them." The beacon is tuned to frequencies that make void wraiths think there's a massive energy source just outside the system, Emma confirmed. "Most of the swarm will chase the signal away from us." The plan worked exactly as Emma and the cubs had practiced. The majority of the wraiths abandoned the station and streaked toward the false signal, leaving only a handful still trying to drain the station's power. But these remaining creatures were the largest and most dangerous of the swarm. "Now what?" Talon asked as the surviving wraiths began cutting through the hull with tendrils of pure energy. "Now we show them something they've never seen before," Emma said. She looked at Storm and Ash, who nodded their understanding. Ravenclaw, hunting instincts combined with human strategy. Emma activated the station's internal sensors and projected a three-dimensional map of the approaching wraiths. They move in predictable patterns following energy gradients. If we can create artificial gradients, we can herd them exactly where we want them. Storm and Ash studied the display with the focused intensity of natural predators analyzing prey. They began making soft planning sounds to each other, their golden eyes tracking potential movement paths. "There," Storm indicated a junction where 3 corridors met. "Trap point." Ash nodded agreement and pointed to another location. "Secondary position. Backup plan." Talon stared at his cubs in shock. "They're thinking like pack hunters, but the prey has no physical form." "Doesn't matter," Emma said, beginning to set up the energy traps. "Hunting is about understanding your target and using the environment against them. Storm and Ash have learned to hunt with their minds as well as their claws." The cubs moved through the station with deadly purpose, their human-taught knowledge combining seamlessly with their predatory instincts. They positioned energy dampeners at key points, creating corridors that would funnel the wraiths into killing zones. Ensuing, the creatures finally breached the hull. They found themselves in a maze designed by minds they couldn't comprehend. The wraiths followed the energy trails exactly as predicted, flowing toward what they thought were power sources, but were actually carefully constructed traps. Storm and Ash coordinated the attack with silent precision. As each wraith entered a kill zone, they triggered electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the creature's energy matrices, causing them to dissipate harmlessly into space. The entire battle lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, the station was secure, and the surviving void wraiths had fled to follow the decoy signal into deep space. Talon and his warriors stood in stunned silence, watching Storm and Ash calmly shut down the trap systems and begin repair protocols on the damaged hull sections. "This is impossible," the scarred female whispered. "Cubs cannot plan tactics. Cubs cannot think strategically." "These cubs can," Emma said quietly, "because they've learned to combine the best of both our species. Ravenclaw strength and instincts, human creativity and cooperation." Talon approached his cubs slowly, his expression unreadable. Storm and Ash watched him warily but didn't back down. They had proven themselves in the most fundamental way their species understood. They had successfully hunted dangerous prey. "You protected the pack," Talon said finally, his voice heavy with conflicting emotions. "All of the pack, even those not of your blood." "That's what families do," Emma said. "They protect each other." Talon's golden eyes moved between his cubs and Emma, taking in their obvious bond, their seamless cooperation, their shared success against a threat that would have destroyed a traditional Ravenclaw pack. "You have taught them to be stronger than we imagined possible," he admitted reluctantly. "But you have also taught them to be something we are not, something we do not understand." Storm stepped forward and made a series of gentle sounds to her father. She pressed her forehead against his massive chest in a gesture of affection, but when she pulled back, her posture made it clear that her loyalty remained with Emma. Ash joined his sister, offering the same gesture of respect to their sire while maintaining his position as Emma's protector. The other adult Ravenclaw watched this unprecedented display with growing unease. Their entire worldview was being challenged by two cubs who refused to fit into the categories their culture had created. "What you have built here changes everything," Talon said to Emma. "If other packs learn of this, if they see what these cubs have become, it will shake the foundations of our society." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Emma replied. "Maybe it's time for your society to evolve." The words hung in the air as Talon considered their implications. Around him, his warriors shifted restlessly, uncomfortable with ideas that challenged everything they had been taught to believe about strength, survival, and the natural order of their species. But the evidence was undeniable. Storm and Ash had not been weakened by their time with Emma. They had been transformed into something unprecedented. Ravenclaw who could think beyond individual survival, who could protect others, without losing their own deadly capabilities, who had learned to use their minds as weapons as sharp as their claws. The future of both species hung in the balance as two very different concepts of strength faced each other in the aftermath of battle, each trying to understand what the other represented and what it might mean for the galaxy they all shared. Stars wheeled slowly past the observation windows as the last repair drones finished sealing the hull breaches left by the Void Wraith attack. Emma sat in her command chair, watching Storm and Ash work alongside Talon and his warriors to restore the station's damaged systems. The sight would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. The cubs moved between their birth father and their chosen family with easy confidence, translating not just languages but entire ways of thinking. When Talon struggled with a human interface, Storm showed him how to navigate the controls. When one of the warriors expressed confusion about the energy trap system, Ash demonstrated the principles using simple Ravenclaw hunting concepts. "They are teaching us," Talon said quietly, joining Emma at the viewport. His massive form cast long shadows in the dim light. "My own cubs are teaching me things I never thought possible." Emma watched Storm explain human engineering concepts to the scarred female warrior, using patient gestures and careful demonstrations. "They're natural teachers. They want to share what they've learned. For my people, knowledge is power, and power is never shared freely," Talon replied. "Yet these cubs give their knowledge to anyone willing to learn, even to those who came to drag them back to punishment." Ash approached them carrying a datapad covered in diagrams and calculations. He had been working on something for the past hour, his golden eyes bright with the same scientific curiosity Emma had come to love. "Show him," Emma encouraged. Ash activated the display, revealing a three-dimensional model of Ravenclaw pack hunting patterns. But these weren't traditional formations. They incorporated human concepts of coordination, communication, and mutual protection that transformed the basic hunting pack into something far more effective. "Hybrid tactics," Emma explained, as Talon studied the display. Ravenclaw strength and speed combined with human strategic thinking and cooperation. Storm and Ash figured out that protecting your packmates makes everyone stronger, not weaker. Talon manipulated the holographic display, watching how the hybrid formations responded to different scenarios. In every simulation, the mixed tactics outperformed traditional Ravenclaw approaches by significant margins. "This would revolutionize how we hunt, how we fight, how we survive," he murmured. "But it would also revolutionize how we think about ourselves." Storm bounded over to join them, her silver markings catching the starlight. She made excited clicking sounds and pointed to another section of Ash's datapad. Emma smiled as she recognized what the Cubs had been planning. "They want to establish a school," Emma translated. "A place where young Ravenclaw can learn both sets of skills, traditional pack hunting and human cooperation." "Here, on this station?" "Why not?" Emma asked. "It's isolated enough to be safe for experiments, but accessible enough for families to visit their cubs. Storm and Ash could be the first teachers showing others what they've learned." Talon's expression cycled through amazement, confusion, and something that might have been hope. "You would allow this? You would welcome more of our kind? If they come in peace to learn and grow rather than to conquer, then yes." The scarred female warrior approached their group, her posture less aggressive than when she had first arrived. Behind her came two other adults, their golden eyes fixed on the datapad Ash still held. "Show us more," she requested. "Show us how this cooperation works in practice." Over the next several hours, Storm and Ash demonstrated their hybrid techniques. They showed how Ravenclaw senses could be enhanced by human technology, how pack hunting tactics could be improved by human communication methods, how individual strength could be multiplied by group coordination. The adult Ravenclaw watched with growing fascination as concepts they had never considered began to make sense. When Storm showed them how early warning systems could give a pack crucial advantages, or when Ash demonstrated how shared decision-making could lead to better tactical choices, the warriors began to understand that strength didn't have to mean isolation. "There will be resistance," Talon warned Emma as the demonstration concluded. "Many packs will see this as contamination, as weakness that must be destroyed." "There's always resistance to change," Emma replied. "But look at your warriors. They're not afraid of these new ideas, they're excited by them." It was true. The adults who had come to enforce traditional law were now eagerly asking questions about hybrid tactics, about cooperation principles, about how their own cubs might benefit from such training. "Some will come," Talon agreed. "The younger generation especially. They have always chafed at the limitations of the old ways." Storm and Ash exchanged glances and began making rapid planning sounds to each other. Emma had learned to recognize when they were developing one of their elaborate schemes. "What are you two plotting now?" she asked with fond exasperation. Storm approached Talon and made a series of respectful but determined sounds. She gestured toward the communication console and then back to her father. "She wants to send a message," Emma realized. "To other packs, other young Ravenclaw who might be interested in learning new ways." Talon considered this for a long moment. "If word spreads that I allowed my cubs to remain with a human, that I endorsed these hybrid methods, it will divide our entire species." "Maybe division is what your species needs," Emma said gently. "Maybe it's time for some Ravenclaw to choose a different path." Ash joined Storm in front of their father, both cubs looking up at the massive alpha with hope and determination. They made soft, persuasive sounds, and Emma could see Talon's resolve wavering. "They're asking for a chance," Emma said. "A chance to prove that their way can work, that cooperation and compassion don't have to mean weakness." Finally, Talon nodded slowly. "Send the message. But understand that this choice will change everything for our people. There will be no going back." Storm and Ash immediately began composing their transmission, working together to craft a message that would reach young Ravenclaw across the galaxy. They told the story of their exile, their rescue, their transformation from outcasts to pioneers. They shared the tactical data, the hybrid techniques, and most importantly, the proof that strength and compassion could coexist. The message went out on frequencies that would reach every Ravenclaw ship and settlement. Within hours, responses began coming back, not from pack leaders or established authorities, but from young cubs and adolescents who had always felt constrained by traditional limitations. Some responses were hostile, dismissing the cubs as corrupted weaklings, but others expressed curiosity, hope, and desperate desire for alternatives to the harsh rigidity of traditional pack life. 12 ships have already changed course toward this system, Emma reported as she monitored the communication traffic. Young Ravenclaw who want to learn these new methods. And twice as many pack leaders demanding their return, Talon added grimly. This will cause civil conflict among our people. All evolution causes conflict, Emma replied. The question is whether the benefits outweigh the costs. Storm approached Emma and pressed her forehead against the human's shoulder, making the purring sound that meant deep contentment. Ash joined them, creating a three-way embrace that represented everything they had built together. Looking at the cubs, seeing their confidence and happiness, Emma knew the answer. Whatever conflicts arose, whatever challenges they would face, the bond between species that Storm and Ash represented was worth fighting for. Talon watched his cubs with their chosen human and made his own decision. I will remain, he announced to his surprised warriors. I will help establish this school, this bridge between our peoples. If my cubs can learn to be both Ravenclaw and something more, then perhaps their old father can learn as well. The scarred female stepped forward. And I will send word to my own pack. There are always cubs who struggle with traditional ways, who might benefit from these new methods. As the first ships of curious young Ravenclaw began appearing at the edge of the system, Emma realized that Sanctuary Station was about to become something unprecedented in galactic history. A place where two species could meet not as predators and prey, but as teachers and students, as family members united by choice rather than genetics. Storm and Ash had refused to return to their den because they had found something better. Now they were offering that same opportunity to others, creating a new kind of pack that included anyone brave enough to believe that strength and kindness could make each other stronger. The cubs who had once slept beside a human in defiance of every natural law had become the architects of a future where such defiance might become the foundation of something entirely new. As Emma watched them prepare to welcome their first students, she knew that the galaxy would never be quite the same again.